Hello, everybody. We're going to get started. Thanks so much for your time tonight. As the slide says, this is public meeting number 1 for the Green Lane Park Master Plan. And hopefully, what did I say, 1? Probably 3. Thank you. Hopefully you picked up a handout at the table and signed in. Appreciate everybody coming out in the holiday season. It's tough having meetings in December. We really appreciate your diligence and dedication to coming to these meetings. Is anybody here for the first time, public meeting? Raise your hand. Okay, a few people. All right. I just mentioned this presentation will be on the county website in a few days. So a lot of information tonight. You won't catch everything, but you'll have an opportunity to go back and read that. Here's our agenda tonight. And our team, my name is Pete Simone, and the landscape architect. With me tonight is Sarah Leeper, who's the project manager, Jeff Creary on our team, and Mike McGraw from RES, Resource Environmental Services. And then we have an architect, Solomon Jury, on the team, and Pat Stacy, who's our certified park and recreational professional. They're not here tonight, but we're going to present some of the information they developed. As you know, we're working with a large steering committee. I'm not going to read everyone's name. And just to remind you, this is a master plan. So we're in this process here, we're right at the draft plan stage, and we're going to present to you tonight some of the draft plan recommendations. We can't present every one, otherwise we'd be here till midnight, which I'm sure you don't want to be. But when you get the report, everything's going to be in the report. We are behind our schedule. We're aiming to have the report to the county on January 16th. So hopefully soon thereafter, that'll be available on the website for you to review in detail. And so we go through the master plan. There'll be a review period. We'll have an approved plan, and then the county will move through with securing funding for various recommendations, going through designer engineering, construction, and completed improvements. And because this is a master plan for a 3,000 plus acre facility, this is going to take time to do. It'll be implemented in steps, of course, over a period of years. Here's our schedule. I'm not going to bore you with that. We've had pretty good participation. At the first public meeting, we had 94 people attend and 37 virtually. Second meeting, we had almost 40 people attend in person and 50 virtually. We probably have close to 40 people here tonight, and how many online?
15.
We have 15 people participating. And I should mention, this meeting is being recorded. And we've gotten over 1,000 responses on the survey. That survey will be in its entirety in the draft plan, so you can see what people thought, what the various questions we asked. And next week, we're actually doing 2 focus groups, one with area educators and with Kevin Creeley, who's the Green Lane Park Environmental Education Specialist. We're going to be talking about how local educators can get involved in the future in programming and environmental education at the park, which was a big topic of discussion at our first public meeting. Then we're also going to be meeting with members of the Montgomery County Park Board to strategize about how we present this plan eventually when it goes to the new commissioners in Montgomery County. When we're lobbying, and I hope you lobby for additional support for this park, because we think it's a great park and it deserves more funding. You'll hear why. So the plan overview, we've developed 4 broad categories of priorities. The first is stewardship, meaning caring for this ground. It's not maintenance, it's managing the natural lands, taking invasives out, putting in plantings, native plantings that will give the site an ecological uplift to increase the habitat value, the ecological value. Mike's going to speak to that a lot tonight. So if we do nothing else in the next 5 or 10 years, we're recommending you do stewardship. Because if you don't have the resource, you don't have anything else. And the resource is in danger. It's not going to go away tomorrow, but if steps aren't taken to really manage it and enhance it, it's going to degrade. The second priority is administration maintenance, because in order to administer and help with the stewardship, you have to have the manpower and the facilities at the park in Region 2, this is Region 2 of the park, to maintain these things, to run the stewardship operations, house the equipment, etc. The third is going to be environmental education programming that will take place, and you'll see what's suggested as a new visitor center, maybe other places in the park, because we come to the recommendation that a visitor center or a nature center, maybe it's going to be called, is needed. That's probably 10 years in the future. It's not going to happen right away. And then the last priority are general site improvements. We think these site improvements are important, but in the list, they're the least important in terms of moving forward. There may be some site improvements that the county decides to do sooner than later, but in the big picture, we're really looking at protecting the resource, and that's why stewardship is first. So, we looked at some definitions of stewardship so that we know what we think we're talking about. And it's really caring for land while taking into consideration its ecological, economic, social, and cultural dimensions. And we like that because we think it covers everything we've talked about in these meetings. Economic development in the communities up here. If you come to the park, you might go to the brew pub and have a beer and a sandwich. You might come to a cultural event and spend money on gas. That's economic development. There may be cultural displays or festivals with, let's say, Native American groups or something like that. There used to be a Scottish festival here years ago. And also the social dimensions. I mean, there are clubs here. The Astronomy Club of Delaware County meets here. The equestrians are here. There's a biking community. It's a big social element to what happens in the park. And we think that's important too in terms of building this community. So we like this definition. You can suggest changes to this as you draft it. The other thing we're suggesting is to change the name of Green Lane Park to Green Lane Preserve. And the reason we're suggesting that is because we think it speaks more to the mission what we think the mission should be in terms of it conveys the focus of these lands. It maybe separates this park from other parks in the county, and we think this is different than a lot of the other parks in the county and the region. It's not ambiguous about what the park is focused on. We think it'll help clarify for funding partners what the focus is of Green Lane Park. We think it helps Aqua, who controls the water supply and protects it in terms of focusing on protecting that resource. And just better aligns with what we think should be happening at the park. Doesn't mean recreation doesn't happen here. Doesn't mean all the things that are going on now can't happen. But it might be a way to focus better on what this great piece of ground is all about. And we did look at the 2000 master plan, which I believe is on the county website. If you haven't seen it, very good document. And we have found that a lot of the issues in the 2000 master plan are still remaining. Some of the things the county has done a really good job at is building some of the facilities that were recommended in that 2000 master plan, like the amphitheater, for example, and some of the other facilities that are used by all of you to recreate in the park. The things that haven't progressed as much as the people who did that 2000 master plan, I think, would like to see, are some of the stewardship things that we're talking about today that Mike's going to go over. And so we suggested a new mission statement, and the old one was to create the crown jewel of Montgomery County, to protect natural resources, and to serve as a premier outdoor recreation facility serving people of all ages, interests, and abilities in the outdoors. Good. We're suggesting maybe a little change to that. Green Lane Preserve will be the premier example of land stewardship in the region of sustainably protecting and enhancing its natural resources while creating multiple opportunities for recreation, environmental education, and ecotourism. So again, this is a work in progress. You can suggest changes to that wording, suggest some wordsmithing. But again, we're trying to emphasize the stewardship of the resources. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Mike McGraw, who's going to take you through all the stewardship recommendations. Thanks, Pete.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming out tonight. So I always like to say, because we do a lot of these projects together, that they do all the real hard work and I get to have all the fun. So I'm out here doing all these wildlife and botanical inventories to inform the master plan, especially if there's a natural areas component. And as mentioned, the natural areas component is really the primary, it's the crowning jewel of this space. So to determine the existing resources, to provide that meaningful and thoughtful level of ecological recommendations, we tried to look at what are the assets and the liabilities from a natural history standpoint. So we looked at plant communities, wildlife populations, unique habitat types, assemblages or communities of natural areas, and what are the liabilities? Two examples, prime examples are invasive species or erosion. We also looked from a common sense basis to establish management units, because if we learn about the space and we want to provide recommendations, there has to be a systematic way for the county to be able to track the efforts and to prioritize, right? So we need to spatially organize how we make our recommendations. So we did that. We developed stewardship goals and actions, and then we also provide opinions of probable cost and some funding strategies to help them over the next 10, 15, 20 years to realize these recommendations, right? Just Rome wasn't built a day or whatever. It takes time, money, resources, and good planning. So we're trying to help facilitate that, hand them a document that they can not just gather dust on a shelf, but be a functional document they can use as a playbook. So as a precursor, I'll just mention, this was the timing was really good. We had full growing season, we had breeding bird season. We got to see this space in pretty much all seasons. We're not always afforded that when we do these master plans. But still, this is a snapshot, right? This place is thousands and thousands of acres. Some places are very difficult to access. It would be foolish to think that I and my small team could document every single plant and every single bird and every single reptile and amphibian on the site. So this is a snapshot, right? So through the process, we identified 183 plants, of which about 3/4 are native, which is great, right? There's some really amazing plant communities on site. Terribly robust spring ephemerals in certain areas, right? These gorgeous wildflowers that only bloom in April and May. Lots of good late season growth stuff, really good tree diversity, but that 43 invasive species, unfortunately, reigns supreme in some areas. So here's an example of some really intact woods. This is in the northwest side of Deep Creek, in a relatively difficult to access area. You can see I'm on a trail, but it's just a beautiful area. It's really free of invasives, the bird community is robust. And then here's a creek that's flowing through that area. It's just stunning, really, really intact forested habitat. This is what you often see, especially along major trail areas, high traffic areas, is the prevalence of invasive species. This is wineberry and multiflora rose and other nasty plants that don't play well with other plants, right? They tend to dominate, colonize, simplify the landscape, which then makes less availability for other biodiversity. Like birds don't really breed in this, insects don't eat this, right? So what we want to do is sort of document and map those areas as areas to focus on for stewardship, but most importantly, we have to prioritize them, right? You don't want to go into the center of a sea of invasives and start your effort there. These are examples of leading edges, right? These are areas where invasive species are meeting natural communities. It's the front lines, right? So those are the highest priority areas from a temporal perspective, right? This is where we're hoping the county will invest the resources right off the bat. So we're prioritizing these things. You can see there's a nice stream here. There's an ash-dominated floodplain there. It's a nice wetland, forested wetland. But Emerald ash borer, everybody knows about spotted lanternflies because the wine and fruit lobby did a good job promoting to kill them. But nobody talks about emerald ash borer unless you're a nature nerd like me. Hopefully there's plenty of you in here. But as those trees are dying, what's coming in underneath is invasive species. So, this is a great example of a location where we could do some proactive management so this doesn't become a liability 5, 10, 15 years from now. Switching gears to birds, one of my favorite things. Any bird nerds out here? All right, great. Oh, awesome. So then you guys already know that this place is phenomenal. And you have successional habitat, there's grassland habitat, and there's good forest habitat. So you can spend open water, right? So you can spend, if you plan your day properly, a good day in late May, you could see 100 bird species in one day this cycle. Pretty amazing. You could plan a good big day here, right? So first I laid out, just looking at the space, over 50 points. Some of them were just impossible to get to. Others didn't make sense, or there was duplicity on the representative habitat types. So I pared it down to 40 locations. And for those of you in the future that would want to contribute to citizen science, if you're already birding here, but you'd be okay with standing in an exact location and collecting data, and then go to another place, stand there and collect data, I would love that. I'd love for this to become a citizen science effort moving forward, right? So we have that body of data, especially as the county starts to enact these changes. we can see change in the bird community, right? I teach ornithology at Penn. The first thing I promote is that birds are phenomenal indicators of ecosystem condition. Whether they're there or not there tells us a whole lot about the landscape. You can close your eyes and listen to the birds singing and have a solid idea of not only the habitat you're in, but the quality of it. So in spring, we did spring migration, fall migration, breeding season. I observed 135 species on the site. And I put of 222 because when we put this together a few weeks ago, that was the current diversity on eBird. So obviously, right, who knows, there could be a couple of vagrants that have showed up just recently. I don't know if any of you guys saw, there's a blue tail, a European songbird that's in Whiting, New Jersey right now. First ever record for North America. Probably gonna go chase it tomorrow. But, so, who knows, right? You never know. But 135 species, of which 90 we confirmed as probable or confirmed breeders, right? That's a big deal. That shows that a lot of birds rely on Green Lane Preserve to raise young, and that's super important. Lots of migrants and a couple possible breeders. Here's just some of the photos I took. Eastern kingbird, bluebird. These are all pretty commonly seen species. Eagles are pretty common to see. They're actually copulating and building their nests right now. This is the breeding season for them. There's a red-shouldered hawk, and these were common golden eyes that I saw in the open water, which is a not terribly common waterfowl species for our areas. Pretty cool. Herpetofauna, this is my, I'm a bird nerd, obviously, but I got into wildlife biology through reptiles and amphibians. I'll always be a nature nerd. This was my park animal. This is a northern red salamander. So it was awesome to be out here on warm, rainy nights in April and May. Slowly cruising roads, getting out, walking, listening for singing, calling amphibians. We identified 14 species, right? 7 salamander species, 7 frogs and toads. And then just beating the bush, flipping rocks, being in the right place at the right time, looking for basking turtles. We found 6 turtles and 5 snake species as well. None of these are state listed species, but some of them are in critical decline. And again, they have a lower detection probability than birds. So it's very likely that this diversity is much higher on the site. And it just takes, anybody who's been, if this is your interest, you've been doing this for years here, like a couple friends of mine that live in the community, they know that there's more species out here. So, but it gave us a great snapshot to help us understand where the important habitats are for these species so we could bring that into the fold. For mammals, I did a camera trap. I hid some camera traps out there for a while. Don't worry, they were way off the beaten trail. Guess what the most common mammal was? White-tailed deer, yeah. And I don't think I had I got literally thousands of photos of white-tailed deer, and I don't think one photo didn't have evidence of a tick infestation. The deer are not doing too well here. There's an overpopulation of deer. We'll get to that later, but for management, there really should be some deer management out here. There should be a hunting program or something. There's ideas that are cooking. So we identified 12 species. This isn't to say that a male juvenile bear doesn't move through this corridor every now and again, or a bobcat or something really cool, right? Do I even have bats on here? No, my bad. There's 2 bat species identified too. But I didn't do any acoustic monitoring. There's likely 4 or 5 bat species. Management units, we broke it up into 6 units. They're kind of east and west, to the north, to the south, and then Deep Creek and Green Lane Park proper are the total, the 6. The northwest one, which we're going to dive into a little bit more, if I'm not talking too long, how am I doing? All right, cool. It's the biggest one. It's over 1,000 acres. And this does include the open water as well, I think. Maybe. Yes? Yeah, okay. But you see there's a lot of land up there in the upper left corner. The other one's kind of average around 400 to 500 acres, except for the Green Lane proper one, which is less than 200 acres. It just made sense to break them into these. If you're not aware of the geology here, I have a point to do this fancy. I'm not going to push the wrong button. Hey, look at that. So the geology roughly around here, everything below this is diabases, right? It's a volcanic rock, and this is all sedimentary, right? It has the red hills, right? And where they meet, the sedimentary rock was cooked by the cooling lava, so you have this weird interface zone where there's another cool, unique plant area. Most of the salamanders and stuff are found in the diabase. So we developed over 60 detailed recommendations that are spread literally throughout the entire space, all related to ecology and stewardship. We're going to just touch on a couple. so I'm not gonna bore you and go through 60 of them right now. But big ones, create the upper Perkiomen grasslands. This is low-hanging fruit. It's huge opportunity to have really a regional significance for a group of birds that are precipitous decline, protect interior forest habitats, and improve the successional habitats, and then also some wetland stuff. So I mentioned the birding, these are the key habitat types that represent, that are required by some really iconic bird species in our region, many of which are blinking out, to be honest. So I think there's a great opportunity here. So diving on the Perkiomen grasslands, literally hundreds of acres of contiguous grassland we can manage out here. And a lot of this was farmland, right? So if we manage this as a grassland, it can keep that iconic sort of pastoral setting. But right now, it's being invaded by multiflora rose and autumn olive and all these nasty invasives, but it's not too late, right? It's not at an advanced state where it's not going to be terribly difficult to and so this is going to be a killer birding location. I do grassland bird research in Canada and all in northern Great Plains and in Kansas and a little bit in Pennsylvania as well. And I know that if we build it, they will come. And there's some great examples. The PA Game Commission is really excited about this. There's a local guy who's been banging this drum for a while, and I'm also friendly with the grassland bird coordinator for PA Game Commission. They are very excited about this. They are very willing to partner, which could possibly even include fire, which is less costly. On a fire column, that they can do that, we can't. And so it's really cool to have that as a strategy. Here's just some photo examples. This is at Swarthmore College. It's a place where we established a meadow. So this is gorgeous. Really good. And like 7 other in this week, they found most birds in North America, unfortunately, are precipitous decline. Without question, grassland birds, precipitous decline, more than 53% lost over 50 years. 3 and 4 eastern meadowlarks are gone. Right? This is real, well-vetted data. This was published in Science. Right? It's one of the most reputable publications known in science globally. So we have this huge opportunity to write that locally. And because these birds are becoming less and less common, it's not much more attractive, right? I mean, any birder here will tell you, it's really delightful to experience a robust grassland bird breeding. These are all photos I've taken of species, not on the site, but all of these bird species comfortably, with confidence. I can say this, like kind of cockily. If we do the grassland conversion here, these 5 iconic grassland species will breed here. It's going to happen. And then there's other amazing birds that could show up and will show up on vagrancy and migration. So just a really, really cool opportunity. I'll leave it at that. If you have questions later, I'm happy to discuss this. You couldn't tell. So successional habitat's another great one. How many of you have noticed the monocultures of red cedar on the site? There's some areas that are just dense with red cedar, and that's all it is. Kind of cool, but from an ecological perspective, not that great, right? So we're trying to come up with some creative solutions on how to protect it. There's 3 different industries that use red cedar, cedar shingles and fence posts and stuff. Maybe there's a way to mitigate some of the costs by brokering an agreement for some, to have someone come and clear some of those areas. Other areas, and again, this is where the breeding birds help. In some areas, prairie warblers are breeding. We don't want to mess with that, right? That's a cool bird, successional, obligated species. But in other areas, next to nothing is breeding in that area, in them, because they're too dense and not enough food, not enough sunlight penetration, not enough diversity. So we prioritized which ones we would do different management strategies for. And the habitat types that we would promote includes savanna. So, less than 50% mature tree canopy with a great diversity of grassland and wildflowers and shrubs underneath. Open meadow, like we just mentioned, shrubland, shrub thicket, wetlands and wetland shrubs, wetland shrub communities. You can see this spine here. And anyone that drives along Knight Road, if you rubber deck the way I do, you can see it in this little pond. Community. Some examples of projects that we've done. We've installed. Here's one along the water. You know, it's teenage park. There's sometimes when there's diversity, when the birds show up. And the wetland diversity, there's a Wilson snipe, and this is late season in Albany, a wetland that we use for storage. There was about 30 fly catching over top. But there's phenomenal opportunities for wetland restoration here as well. That's all I got for that. Thank you for listening.
I didn't get one. So we're talking about administration. Regions, it includes Green Acres, Penny Packer Mills, Sunrise Mill Park, Central Park, Green Valley Park. And in addition to the 60 miles of trail at Green Lane, there are 15 plus miles throughout Region 2. So the staff here and Pat Stacio, our recreation specialist, who's the director of Parks and Rec at the Warren Township, took a critical look at what Joe here to, and I mean, the bottom line is they have limited staff to do a lot of the resources they have. There's a organization, how this all works between the park administrator and the region managers and the rangers, the rangers, the park system, helping engineers on the park. So again, it's overall a good system, and our recommendations hopefully make it better. If we look at money, just look at money in the year 2000 after plan, there was about 1.3 million in staff money, and 300,000 plus in operations money. That was just for Greenland Park, because the Region 2 had been established. Okay? Today we have Region 2, which is a bigger region, and the staffing costs are less than they were for 2000. So the bottom line here is cost our job as that
We apologize for the delay for people that were online, but we're getting back up here.
Cool.
Okay.
All right.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for bearing through us getting back up on the high here. So basically, we're going to go through the park and look at some of the physical recommendations that we're making. One of the things that we kind of looked at with a park this large is starting to create identities for different areas of the park. I think as myself, as a Montgomery County resident, that's not as familiar with Green Lane because I live in the southern part of the county or the eastern part of the county. Understanding that Green Lane Park is so much more than just the proper Deep Creek area, Green Lane area, right? So we want to kind of start to give identities to these different areas so that people understand when they come to visit that there's a lot more they can do here than just have a picnic down at Night Lake or Deep Creek Lake. So these are just, examples of how we might start to create identities for different regions of the park. This is just kind of how we organize the report, but moving forward, kind of through wayfinding and branding, we recommend that the county further develop what these various identities would be. So Mike kind of already went over the perfume and grasslands, looking at Walt Road landings and water resource areas, so really kind of having that area be more than just a boat launch, right? There's a lot more that can go on back there. Starting to identify the Night Road corridor as the Red Hills, right? Kind of looking at that iconic geology over on that kind of eastern side of the lake. Hemlock Point, I think, is pretty well identified, kind of embracing that nature area history that has always been there when the former nature center was there. Green Lane Park, kind of looking at that as the recreation core. If you're going to do active recreation in terms of play tennis or, go to a festival, this is kind of where you're going to go. Deep Creek Woods, again, has a very strong identity as kind of an intact woodland. And then also the Hillwood Roads, which is the Blue Trail on the western side of the shore. So we're not going to be able to go through in detail all of these plans. I know you went through some of the boards, call out some of the plans, and we'll present all those boards. Will be up online too, so people can look at the plans in detail. But we'll zoom in on different areas. One of the things that we really want to focus on too, as we kind of go through, is just wayfinding and kind of helping people navigate through the park. Part of it is just understanding the trail system. So part of our charge is kind of updating the trail system. Some of the existing mapping is inaccurate, so kind of looking at making sure that mapping is accurate in terms of the current trails in the park, but then also looking at where we might want new trails as well. But when we look at wayfinding, we're also dealing with two different scales. We're dealing with a vehicular scale as you're driving through the park and trying to get to different destinations within the park, and then also looking at the pedestrian scale. So when we're in a vehicle, there's some key ways as you start to enter into the park. There could be some cues in terms of just a gateway entry. Maybe it's simple stone piers, maybe it's a sign, but at different areas, kind of as you enter each part of the park, kind of just knowing that you're in Green Lane Park as a vehicular point. And then also improving signage kind of at the entrances of various parking lots, making sure that parking lots are kind of named so people know where they're going, especially along Night Road. There's a lot of confusion as where you might be meeting friends if you're going to a Night Road parking lot, because there's a couple of them. When we're looking at pedestrian wayfinding, really kind of looking at the trail network. The county does a good job of kind of rating their trails. There's a standard in which you kind of say a trail is easy, difficult, or more difficult. So they do that, but part of the problem is when you look at a trail like the Blue Trail, it might have some easy sections, but then it has some really difficult sections. So making sure we communicate clearly that if someone, at our last meeting, someone kind of talked about going on a hike from Green Lane Park to Hill Road boat launch and not realizing how difficult that trail is going to be. So really making sure that we're communicating with pedestrians about the types of trail experiences they're going to have as they go out on a hike, and helping them understand where they might want to take a family for a hike versus kind of do a really rugged, intense hike. And then kind of looking at that wayfinding and building that into the branding. So when you're on a trail, you know which part of the park you're in. You can easily, this ties into emergency response. You can easily tell a responder where you might have been hurt or where a code trail person with you, sorry, might have been hurt as well. So kind of, some people look at branding and they think this is pretty candy, but it's also a way of just helping people communicate where they are in this space, because it is, as we said, thousands of acres. So it all kind of ties in and has a practical purpose. So kind of zooming into each area, we'll look at each area in large, and then some of them will go into the detail. So with the Perkiomen grasslands, here we really want to build on the great stewardship recommendations that Mike made and create more points for access in this area so that people can really see this area as a destination and kind of understand how to use it. With that said, we do want to respect kind of the fact that it is going to be a grassland habitat. So we're very conscious of how we laid out trails through here so that we can maintain kind of a core breeding habitat. But as you can see here, there's certain symbols. So we're kind of noting that idea of like a vehicular gateway with these yellow dots, the idea of kind of parking. In general, we've looked at kind of dispersing parking throughout the park. So we're not trying to put a giant parking lot in one space, but kind of giving people some trailhead parking versus kind of a destination parking so that people can disperse cars and kind of not all be on the same part of the trail. And it also allows the county to kind of phase in parking, right? You don't need to build it all at once. It kind of meet the demand. Another symbol we're using is kind of improved crosswalk. So we do have some crossings along Church Road and Layfield Road through here, and then also bridge symbols. So we're proposing a stream crossing. So that's not always going to be a formal bridge. Sometimes it might be a primitive stepping stone crossing, but it's just the idea that there needs to be some form of improved crossing to get people from one side to the other. So when we look at the Perkiomen grasslands, you know, the main thing that we're really looking here, and with all the areas, is how do we make these amenities both inclusive but also kind of respect nature. So with the Perkiomen grasslands, we wanted to make sure that we have the opportunity to create an ADA hiking trail here. This is kind of, you know, Church Road kind of sits in the valley where the Perkiomen comes into the Green Lane Reservoir as well as the Molasses Creek. And then as you kind of move up through this field, you hit a high point right at this kind of ridge line that runs through the field. So the idea is we have gentle enough slopes that we could have an ADA trail that would kind of bring you through this loop. And then at the top, we would have kind of a hawk or a birding overlook so that you could kind of look at migratory birds on the ridge lines. And then we would need a slight switchback that would bring us kind of back down. So this kind of creates a mile loop. As we kind of connect over, this would be kind of an improved parking lot. So again, we're looking at 20 to 30 cars with the idea that, again, you could phase parking in as needed. As we move over across Hawk Road, looking at a mown trail system, right? So there are some mown trail systems through here, so just kind of formalizing what that route should be, kind of keeping it to the outer edges to kind of have this core habitat where we have a lot of wetland activity going on. And then again, this is the idea of kind of a smaller trailhead parking area, so 10 cars, maybe 20 if demand requires it in the future. And then this would be kind of that blue is showing you where that ADA trail will be focused. As we move further to the west and south, we're looking at the other side of the Bird Reservoir currently. So this is along Layfield Road. So here's where we're looking at kind of that primitive stream crossing. We would also have a kind of just a trail that is existing for the most part, just kind of formalizing that route to a primitive stream crossing. From that point, you could continue north up to the fly fishing area or continue down to Layfield Road with additional opportunities for interpretive overlooks. At the bird sanctuary itself, focusing on an ADA platform so that people can kind of set up their tripods or cameras and really look out over the water there, improving this driveway with ADA parking access. Up at the fly fishing area, just some really minor improvements, maybe a few picnic tables. You know, the day I was out there were a bunch of kids out there with their grandfather and father looking for, I guess, crawdads or crawfish in the creek. So just a place for, you know, families to kind of sit after they do something like that and gather and kind of talk about their experience. And then also looking at a trail connection that would take you up to the adjacent Camelot Park. As I said, those trails would continue south, and again, a little trailhead parking lot at Layfield Road, and then an improved crosswalk. You know, with all these crosswalks, we're recommending that these be rapid flashing beacons, so those are self-actuated by a trail user, so that traffic is alerted to the fact that a pedestrian is going to cross into the roadway. There might be additional improvements that are needed on Lakefield. We acknowledge that that is a very high-speed road. So, you know, through design and engineering, that would be finalized. On to Walt Road landings. So again, this was kind of the bird sanctuary. The idea here is you have the potential to kind of continue trail all the way into the Walt use area. Really working with the existing facilities that are there. There's a trail network already established, so improving that trail network, as well as providing some additional parking. We also saw this as a place to provide more picnic opportunities. So looking at picnic pavilions, there's a detailed plan over there that we'll also have up on the internet. But really minor improvements in this area just to make it more of a destination for people that aren't necessarily boating, because it does offer some really pretty views across the lake, especially when you go back into kind of the kayak storage area. Looking at the Red Hills area, you know, this is an area where there's extensive trail networks. The two official trails are the Red Trail, which kind of winds and crosses Knight Road and kind of comes back along the water's edge before hitting the causeway and going up to the Blue Trail. There's also the Honeysuckle Trail that runs closer to the water's edge. It's more of a rustic hiking trail that is open to bike and horse. Really what we want to do here, and then you have kind of all these unofficial trails, you know, they were once part of the county trail system. Currently, they're not able to maintain them, so they're considered unofficial trails. So really working with the county to come up with a plan to really bring these trails back into the trail fold. A lot of that will be done through partnerships, but also phased out over years so that it is manageable, because it is not insignificant. We're talking about 7 miles of trails, and you only have 5 miles of existing. But also looking at clear, improved parking areas, both at the eastern end of Knight Road, and then where we have the gazebo overlook, looking at improved parking there as well. And again, seeing that as a location where we can have some more picnic pavilions. So really kind of the idea was to take the pressure off of Green Lake Park and look at opportunities throughout the park where you could have more picnic activities, maybe bring in a little revenue through the rentals, and kind of spread out that use and introduce people to new parts of the park without disrupting kind of the natural surroundings as well. Looking at the Hill Road Woods on the opposite side of the lake, so this is where the Blue Trail passes through. We do have the Hill Road boat access here. So looking at some parking improvements there. Pete kind of went over the maintenance building that we're looking at there as well. Swinging Bridge Road, you know, one of Mike's recommendations is that wood area is pretty full of invasives.
Yeah,
and
right along
needs
the road.
some help. So the thought was, you know, in doing that restoration work, maybe that's the potential to have a small trailhead parking area for like 10 cars. To again, start to disperse pressure off of maybe a high activity area where you have boating, trail usage, and kind of give people an opportunity to park elsewhere. When we looked at kind of the trail network through here, you know, we first talked about the idea that maybe there should be bridge crossings. You have multiple ravines that kind of come down this really steep hillside, and it's really hard to get back into that area for maintenance or emergency response. As we really started to look at the trail network and kind of understand where you can get and where you can't get with in like an emergency response or maintenance situation, we didn't think putting bridges in was really viable. And I think the trail users appreciate the fact that there's not bridges there. So really looking at working with the county and recommending that they develop kind of partnerships with landowners, because the one area where you really can't get to is kind of the central area, right? And there is some large landowners there that have open farmland that maybe they would be open to having an emergency response come through their property. So really kind of working with landowners to see if that's an option, but kind of keeping this Blue Trail as more of a rustic trail. Hemlock Point Nature Area, again, very little to do here in terms of adding trails. Really the big work here is to remove all the impervious kind of infrastructure that's left from when we had the camp there, right? So kind of, but using those existing corridors for new trails. So we do see this again, maintaining the Hemlock Point Trail as a hiking trail only. You have a connector trail that passes through there, so that takes you to the Red Trail, down to the Perfume Trail. But then kind of developing an ADA loop having a pavilion there that would be open air for education purposes, and then maybe having some kind of educational self-guided hike in that area. It is a really great place for spring ephemerals.
Yeah.
There's some great seats on that hillside, so a lot of possibilities. I think a lot of residents have talked about how much they love the nature center there in the past. So kind of keeping that history alive. Deep Creek Woods, again, with these maps, you're kind of seeing the yellow existing trails. We are proposing kind of formalizing what is an existing trail network that is kind of deeper in the woods that would connect over to the Deep Creek Farm, which sits right on the road frontage, and then kind of creating a loop trail that would connect back into the Perkiomen Trail right at Green Lane Road. That would require one property owner easement. So, that would be something that the county would talk with that property owner moving forward to see if they're amicable to the idea. But really kind of the idea is to create that loop hike that would tie into Green Lane Park, kind of give you a destination. One of the things, we do have an active farmer here that does use he leases those fields for haying. Mike had a great conversation with him about kind of restorative agriculture, if there's a way to do some interpretive grazing in those open fields, so kind of having that animals kind of more in the forefront of the public purview moving forward. Looking at Green Lane Park, we'll go in, but just to kind of understand, so you do have the creek, what we call the Deep Creek area. Historically, I think people still kind of think of the south side of Green Lane Park as Deep Creek. We've kind of identified it more as Green Lane Park because it's a little more active than the Deep Creek Woods. So we're going to kind of zoom in on both of those areas. First, we're just going to kind of talk about vehicular circulation through this area. One of the things that we talk a lot about is on Deep Creek Road, we do have some high traffic speeds as you kind of come up from the south. If you're not familiar with where you're going, you kind of all of a sudden are just at the park and you're not quite, you suddenly have to make a lot of decisions, right? So we want to kind of figure out a way to give people a cue as to where they are, as well as kind of helping to slow down traffic and provide pedestrian crosswalks. That's a big thing that's missing at Deep Creek Road and Snyder Road. So what we're looking at is a traffic circle that will accomplish both the slowing of traffic, as well as kind of creating a memorable spot so you kind of suddenly know where you're going. And then also it builds in pedestrian crosswalks as well. As we proceed north, where you kind of have the the perpendicular parking along Deep Creek Road, developing a raised crosswalk in that area to get people from the parking lot over to the camp or the picnic areas, as well as a couple speed tables. And again, this will help with slowing people down through this area, particularly where we have people parking along the road there. In terms of parking, we are looking at improved parking lots, working within the existing disturbed areas that are currently parking, but really looking to include stormwater management of those parking lots, get some trees in there for shade, as well as water quality. So we are working within, the existing Deep Creek parking lot, the Forgotten Corner parking lot. We are looking at some new parking along the access drive there, which is kind of that loop where people do the hayride, as well as we have that existing parking along the road. So we do lose, I think there is some loss of parking, but we're getting more parking in different areas. And then up on the top lot, again, kind of getting some trees into this area, defining a drop-off area since this is a major picnic destination, kind of having a point to stop and unload your car and having a clear path of where you should go from there. Looking at some reinforced turf parking that would serve as kind of trailhead parking up here. And this is kind of a double purpose. It helps to set the path of how people should park during an event. So with this overflow event area, kind of redirecting the direction of parking allows us to maximize parking in that field for an event. So where we're losing some day-to-day parking, we're picking up a lot more event parking by kind of setting a different pattern in that field. We also want to talk about kind of pedestrian circulation. One of the big goals here was accessibility. So when you kind of see the overall map, there seems to be a lot more pathways. And some of those are just making sure that, we have a pathway to a playground so that everybody from like elderly caregiver to a child that might have mobility issues has an ability to get to that playground. But also we wanted to look at how we create kind of a meaningful experience if you wanted to come here and do a hike. So really kind of looking at how to create more of a loop trail. So one of the big things that we're changing here is how kind of developing pedestrian trails along the main driveway into Deep Creek, improving our crosswalks at the traffic circle. And then taking the Perkiomen Trail, looking at the ability to kind of bring that off of the shoulder where we have kind of maintenance issues with that trail being along Green Lane Shoulder and having a new boardwalk that would bring us more into the park across the neck of Deep Creek coming in. Then we kind of pick up the existing trail as it is today. And once we get out to this area, looking at that old rail trestle to improve it so that we can get pedestrian traffic kind of back across that upper neck of Knight Lake, right? And then that brings us over to this great little spot right along Gravel Road. There used to be kind of a driveway entrance there. Great views out across the lake. From that going south, there needs to be some improvements to Gravel Pike to be able to get a side trail in along Gravel Pike, right? So that improvement would probably, there is right away that Anne County owned land on the western or the eastern side. So kind of shifting the road so that you have enough room to get a trail in between the road and the dam. And then tying into the Snyder Bridge, steel bridge to get you back up into the park itself. Also up at Green Lane Borough, they have plans, you have the current trail that kind of brings you out to Gravel Pike right about here, just off the map. They're looking at plans to extend the trail through their water treatment area and then a bridge across Monocacy Creek and bring you out to Walnut Street. So that would give a more direct connection into the borough, kind of help them with getting people directly into the park. So kind of highlighted here becomes that, loop trail that you could kind of do around the two lakes. Now we'll kind of zoom into each plan, looking at that forgotten corner. This is where we really kind of identified the idea of a visitor center. We looked at a couple different locations on both sides of Deep Creek Road, but we finally thought that this made the most sense in terms of creating a building that would have a presence on the road. So as you drive into the park, you kind of see a building and you say, oh, I should go there. There'll be information for me. As well as kind of tucking it into the Deep Creek Woods. There's a lot of great birding activity there, so opportunities to kind of look into the woods from various parts of the building as well. And then kind of creating this long view that gives you out over the lake. Looking at the Perkiomen Trail, again, trying to get that trail off-road, so realigning it so it kind of brings you right to the building, or you can kind of continue cleanly around the reduced parking area and into the trail corridor up to the Green Lane Park. And then also creating a very clear trailhead into Deep Creek Woods as well. We start to cross the road. We do have the existing traffic circle. And then looking at, a walkway system that would bring you down to that kayak launch, some improved kayak storage, canoe storage here for public access, and then some ADA parking at that launch, and then having this be an ADA kayak launch as well. One of the things we've heard a lot was people didn't realize they could bring their boats here and boat out of this area without having to quarantine their boat. So again, kind of getting that information out there, letting people understand that this is a usable resource for them on a daily basis. Next, kind of looking at just some minor improvements to this picnic area. This is a pretty popular little picnic area. Maybe improving a few areas so that they're ADA accessible in terms of having a table that's easily gotten to with a smooth surface underneath it. And then this would be that raised crosswalk bringing you to the existing parking here, and then 2 additional speed tables that, in conjunction with that crosswalk, would help slow traffic along that Deep Creek Road. So again, just looking in blue, the idea where you suddenly, from this visitor center parking lot, you have very subtle grades that allow for access all the way through this area and would continue into this area, as you'll see as we move forward to the next maps. It's kind of a concept for the visitor center. we're looking at a pretty modest-sized building. The architect was able to come up with a footprint that's 3,500 square feet, and then an additional second floor. So, we're just about 4,000 square feet total. And really try to build off on kind of what they call neo-traditional style, but look at natural materials, something that kind of is reminiscent of that park architecture that you see in the Stone Lodge or the Ranger Station, as well as kind of, how it be sustainable and kind of, the idea of having natural light in this building so it becomes a great place to be in during the day. One of the big ideas was to kind of, as a cover to the main entry here, was to kind of have an overlook so you have that view out to the water from that second floor. In terms of kind of the spaces, looking at the first floor, it's, you kind of walk in, you have a desk area for kind of an attendant to kind of introduce themselves, kind of give people an idea of what they can experience at the park, maybe a visitor center kind of liaison. And then an educational area that would be more for displays, be it nature-based, history-based, or kind of culture-based, what Pete kind of alluded to. So there could be a variety of types of displays here. Maybe they rotate. Maybe they're done in conjunction with the museums that are within the borough or the surrounding areas as well. In the back of the building, you have this flexible meeting room, so it can be divided into two separate rooms or function as one large space. We've included restrooms that would function for both the building, but also have exterior access. And then a kitchen that is really just a catering kitchen in terms of, if you need coffee or warming up some food for an event, you have that space there, as well as kind of other support spaces. Upstairs, looking at some office support space, as well as that connection to the overlook. So this is just kind of a concept. This might evolve, but it's just kind of give you an idea of what fits in this space. Moving a little further over to the south side of Deep Creek Lake, one of the big ideas here is what we're looking at is realigning the driveway. So this is kind of the alignment of the existing driveway. We're keeping that kind of terminating at the Ranger Center, but for public use, encouraging people through signage or gates to kind of come up, and this would be the new entrance into the improved parking area. And what that does, it does a really big thing. It takes vehicles out from between the parking and the lake, and allows that whole area to become a pedestrian kind of promenade, is what we like to call it. And we've even kind of developed this little wider plaza here right at the base of the parking that would overlook the lake. Maybe on an event you have some food trucks there, or you kind of set up some tents for a small farmer's market, something like that, with a small kind of developed picnic road next to it. But this really becomes a place to kind of sit and look out over the lake. Building off of the existing trail network and the existing kind of flag and monument, but just realigning trails a little bit to make sure that we have accessible trails. So we're getting kind of people from the parking lot down to the water through ADA routes. We are still maintaining an improved playground kind of near that restroom area, so that it has a close relationship to the campgrounds, because that's something that's pretty popular for the campers, is that playground. And then also looking at kind of improving the lakeside trail itself, right? So with this trail, not a lot has to happen to the trail, but kind of creating more of a buffer between the trail and the water and having a very defined spots where people can kind of step off. Maybe there's some boulders with a little gravel where they can kind of stand and fish. So that's this idea of kind of maybe these various spots to really kind of control and focus people so that we kind of can start to get more of a buffer between the trail and the water and other areas. So again, in the blue there, you're starting to see where these accessible routes start to appear. So and last, looking at kind of that north area where the amphitheater is. This is again where we're looking at improving this parking lot, maintaining the majority of parking that is there. I think we lost very few spaces in this lot, but really kind of reordering all the ADA parking to the front. At number 1 there, you're seeing that drop-off area, and then our walkways all start to kind of come out from that drop-off area. So really giving pedestrians a sense of arrival and a place to kind of pause before they decide where they want to go, Maybe have some kiosks there, waste baskets, things like that. A few benches if you're waiting to be picked up. We're maintaining at number 2 that existing trail that takes you down to the dam. Some really minor improvements on that to, again, have an accessible route that would take you from the parking lot all the way down to the dam. And then also kind of building on the existing trail that currently terminates at the pavilion and continuing that into kind of some trails or walkways, I should say, that define that amphitheater lawn area. So again, really giving an accessible route into the amphitheater area. On the back arc of that trail, really starting to replant some trees there to get a little more shade in the back of the amphitheater lawn. Also relocating the playground so it has more of a relationship to the pavilion, as well as kind of opening up more of the back of the amphitheater lawn for spectators seating and kind of moving that playground off to the side a little bit, which also gives a little bit of a better view of the lake. With that playground, really looking at kind of theming that with more nature-based play and maybe incorporating some water play elements within that have more of a natural feel. And then last, kind of coming down here, looking at extending a trail that would bring us to an ADA fishing pier, kind of right on the point of Deep Creek Lake here. Improving the picnic road a little bit. So again, just some minor improvements to there to kind of help deal with some of the erosion. Maybe there needs to be more kind of stone dust and kind of defining where those benches are. That would make more of an ADA accessible picnic experience. And then looking at the tennis courts and kind of improving those, that would kind of have our 2 existing tennis courts, then developing the 4 pickleball courts. Last, just some minor things. Maintaining, we have our grass trail that would kind of give you a way to walk along the lake edge there. That kind of is a route in the disc golf course. A side trail along the driveway, so it kind of allows you to get from, Green Lane parking area up to the Perkiomen Trail. And then as well, we kind of talked about that trailhead for parking. Hand off to Keith.
I got that.
We're almost done. Next steps, and thank you. That was about an hour presentation. As you can see, there's a lot of information, and there's more information that we didn't present. We have a map of possible acquisitions or conservation easements around the park, where we want to encourage the county to see conservation easements from private property owners that we think will enhance enhance the value of those properties while protecting the watershed of the park. We have cost estimates, we have partnership recommendations. Seiler and Drury did an architectural review of all the existing buildings, so there's a lot of pieces to this puzzle, and you'll see those when you get a chance to review the plan. We do have, and this presentation again will be up online in a few days. There'll be a place, once we have, you can comment on this, but once you have the report, there'll be a feedback loop to the feedback on the master plan report that you can give us detailed comments if you like. And again, this master plan report will be available 16th of January, and then we're coming back to you, a final meeting on March 20th. Even though we're behind in the report, we want to hold that final day because that's been publicized. So March 20th, and we're over at Red Hill Borough with a meeting like tonight. So thank you for hanging in to all our information. And so now we can talk about anything, ask questions, tell us what you like, don't like. And we're going to pass the microphone around so everybody can hear it.
A lot of hard work that went into this process. I did not hear a single recommendation or really true consideration for the equestrian use of the park. So I was wondering if there are any thoughts on that.
Yeah, we are recommending that the equestrian lot be improved and enlarged. That was something we heard loud and clear from the equestrian group we talked to. So that is, I think, probably the major recommendation in the park, that parking lot, that's also used by the Delaware Valley Astronomer Group, be improved, because we think it's too small, it needs more space, needs to be easier to get in and out of the trails, etc.
one of the random ecological recommendations involves, there's a lot of invasive species on the margins of the equestrian area. So not only to control those invasives, but then sow some native seed and plant plants that obviously we're not intending it to be managed by grazing horses, but plants, native plant species that could be, that are safe for horses to munch on, essentially too.
The other I don't know if this is working.
Yeah, it is.
The other concern I had, and it would be wonderful to have increased usage and parking throughout the park, but you know, being on the trails regularly on a horse or on a bicycle, I'm just concerned it would be pushed off and pushed out of the park.
There's no talk or recommendation or discussion about that, so personally, I mean, we look at horse riding as a historic use in the park, and we think that's important for the culture of the park. So,
Yeah, and just,
no consideration with trying to have fewer equestrians at the park.
and just to be clear, none of the trail uses are changing. So all the trails as they're currently used are gonna maintain, we're not changing recommendations in that.
I understand that, but if you're putting in 20 new parking lots and more people that, you know, just de facto, you know, as you mentioned on that blue trail, it's narrow and rather difficult to begin with on a horse or a bicycle. I think it could lead to that. I'm not saying that you intend to do it.
Yeah, again, remember, our first recommendation is stewardship. The lands have to be invasives need to be removed, habitat needs to be improved. So I think all of you as advocates for the park, you know, county commissioners respond to what they hear from their constituents. So, you know, there will be increased use of the park, but hopefully the resource will be improved too. Who has another question, comment, suggestion?
Will there be recommendations for what to plant after invasive species removal?
I mean, yeah, so I mean, that's something we can start talking tonight about that if you're interested. I think this is where we start to marry some of the ideas. The stewardship itself is important, but also the outreach, right? So there's going to be areas that we're identifying as demonstration areas. So within those locations, there should be educational signage and really encouraging landowners to bring, you know, not take the physical plants out of the park, but, you know, do these same things at home. Like I'm in an adjacent county, I'm in Delaware County, but the moment I bought a house, I started retiring lawn and putting native plants in. And I have 3 neighbors now that never would have thought of that before, but they see all the birds and butterflies, especially in the summer, and they want that. So I'm giving them native seed, I'm helping them. So yes, the short, I don't give short answers if you can tell, but yeah, with confidence, we would love to share and push that information out as much as possible, even making recommendations for where you can access native plant seed mixes or native plant nurseries if you want to plant plugs or trees or shrubs. Yeah, without question.
I don't have any specific feedback. I just wanted to say thank you for the work you guys are doing. Obviously, you put a lot of time into this.
Thank you.
Thank you. That means a lot. I appreciate it.
Did I say a question up?
Yeah.
Did you have a question?
No, you kind of answered. I thought that I am a landowner. I've been trying, we had a terrible windstorm and we lost all our black walnut trees. They were so beautiful.
Mm.
And now invasive species are coming in.
Sure.
And we really need more information. I've been trying to get it on my own.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the great things about for the county to start rolling this plan out, this investment in stewardship, it's going to provide benefits much greater than just the park itself, right? This is a phenomenal example. You know, the park staff are already amazing, right? And they've been busy managing trails and all these other things. As more funds and priorities shift towards natural areas management, the resource will enhance, not just the land itself, but also the people. So it'll be that much easier. You know, the discussions will be that much more common about you know, what happens in these scenarios where a native tree blows down and what comes in is non-native plants. These will be native area practitioners. They'll know, oh, well, you'll likely expect wineberry and multiflora rose to show up. Here's how you can combat that. Here's how you can nip it in the bud. Here's a great low-cost seed mix you can throw down to compete with it until you decide which pretty native shrubs or trees you want to plant in its replacement.
Yeah, I have two questions. First one is emergency response. Do we know that we have cell phone coverage around the entire park?
I think we have reasonable, I don't know if it's everywhere. I know we talked to emergency responders and the police. It was one of our interviews, and I think it's reasonably good. It's probably not everywhere. I just don't know for sure.
Well, mainly it's being able to dial 911. That's the most important when there's an accident somewhere. Anyway.
What their emergency responders told us was their main issue or main challenge is when somebody gets hurt on the trail, for the person to figure out where they are, to tell them where to go. And that's why Sarah mentioned wayfinding being very important, and also maybe some access through cooperative neighbors in some of the more remote parts. But they did not mention that in our interviews with them.
The second question is, all the new construction we're looking at, for electricity, we're considering motion sensor lights, which is quite a bit of electricity.
Well,
I've seen them in State Park.
yeah, we use them in our parks. I think motion sensors we've used, I mean, we're not doing any major lighting in the park. That's not a recommendation. There may be like a light under a pavilion. Where the equestrian parking lot is also where the Delaware Valley Astronomers go.
Yeah, I'm not part of the astronomy.
Oh, great. And so we don't want to interfere with that activity because it's a nice dark area. We also talked to the state police and we said, you ever see the astronomers out there? And they said, yeah, they're out there all night. Can't believe the dedication of these people, how into it they are. But so whatever lighting we would do in the park, and we're not at that level, of course, because this is a master plan. Would want to be dark skies compliant, and also really only put in for safety or for like a maintenance building or something, and really try to direct it. I think we have to be very careful about that.
If I could, just real quick, just to add to that, again, as Peter mentioned, this is too early. Like, once the county gets to a phase where they're going to do some construction and they're really looking at lighting, there's some wonderful BMPs regarding, downward facing lights, certain colors, as you mentioned, motion sensing. And since we're doubling down on natural resources, it's important to keep a night sky dark, right? Birds in migration absolutely have negative impacts from lighting. So we want lighting to be where appropriate and when appropriate. So should we be involved in those later phases, we would make those recommendations. But it's becoming pretty standard to have those BMPs.
I have a question here, and then I'm going to pop up to the front.
Thank you for your involvement here. And my question is, I know how many people use the county park now for all sorts of recreation. My question is, in the next 10 years, what is your prophecy for number of people using the facility?
We can't give you one. That's a pretty, if I can make those predictions, I'd be rich, right? But we don't know. We assume there'll be increased use. I mean, the biggest factor with increased park use was the pandemic, as you probably are aware, that we all have rediscovered the outdoors. So that's in the absence of any specific improvements to the park. Certainly the grasslands, the Perkiomen grasslands recommendation that Mike and Sarah showed you, we would expect additional birds to show up if that bird habitat is improved. But in terms of raw numbers, that's really hard to predict. It's probably somewhat weather dependent and
Also population dependent, right? That depends on like local economic growth.
yeah.
And
This is not an area that's in the path of growth. You're not going to have huge population increases here.
Right.
It's modest, so
Yeah, I
I
think-
can't give you a good answer.
I mean, we are hoping, we are planning for attracting more of the existing user groups and possibly some new ones. But I think that would be insignificant compared to looking at population growth in the region. I think that would be a larger driver for use of the space, right? We're not creating an amusement park or a water slide or so it's really going to be just doubling down and improving on the existing stuff and making it easier and more functional for the county to manage the space. So I think it'll be organic, but yeah, that's kind of an impossible question actually.
I'm just wondering, who decided that you need to develop a master plan to begin with?
Well, it's, the county decided, the county folks who run the parks and historic sites. And I mean, generally, I'm biased because it provides a livelihood for a firm like ours. We do lots of park master plans, okay? But it's a good idea. And the reason it's a good idea is because of stuff we've seen out in the site. There's invasives crowding out native plants. There are deer eating everything, and they're tick-infested deer. So there's a potential more to spread disease to human beings if they're using the park. There are facilities that need to be maintained. The pandemic showed us, it reminded us how important our green spaces are. So there's a great report, the Return on Environment by Montgomery County. Right? All the counties have done these reports. And they show the economic benefits of parks and recreation, how much parks save in healthcare costs, because you're all out in the park walking, biking, riding horses, staying healthy, and that reduces healthcare costs. There's increase in property values in their parks. There's environmental benefits of what does all this green stuff growing, what does it do for the oxygen in the area? How does it absorb rainwater? How does it reduce flooding? So I think that's why the decisions were made, because county administrators recognize that this park and all parks are important and they need to be maintained. There's no such thing as just letting natural land be natural anymore. Too many of, we humans have screwed too many things up, and we have too many influences on this ground to just let it sit. It has to be managed and have stewardship. So sorry for the long-winded answer, but I think that's why these decisions are made.
You mentioned earlier about improvements to the Snowy Road Bridge pedestrian access. Would that include a smooth walking surface on that bridge?
I think that's something I could explore. Currently it's an open grade bridge, but we want to make sure that it was accessible, right? So it does need to be probably modified to make sure that pedestrians can safely cross it. And dogs, yeah, right. I've definitely been on some trails where I've had to carry my dog. So
What other improvements would you be making?
making sure that the railings are appropriate for pedestrians, things like that. So, but the idea would be to try to maintain it as it is, because we don't want to put a lot of money into it. It's kind of a neat, iconic structure. But we just need to make sure it's safe for our furry friends as well as kids and adults of all ages.
Yeah, I just wanted to know what the plans are for dealing with the deer population and how soon that can proceed to be managed.
Well, hopefully sooner than later. Our thought is that the county could enter into a cooperative agreement with the Pennsylvania Game Commission to conduct managed culls on the site at different times of the year. I mean, the simple answer is the numbers of deer have to be reduced. And, Montgomery County actually just did a deer cull several months ago, or it might have been last 6 months ago or more, might have been last winter at Norristown Farm State Park. And that venison was dressed, it was given to local food banks, and it can be a controversial issue. I mean, people, we all love animals, and some people object to that, but we think it's a good and reasonable and needed management tool 300 people a year in the United States are killed by deer running into their car. It's not the deer's fault, there's just too many of them, right? They don't have any predators. So that, and the other thing, the other reason we think that's a good idea is the Game Commission, if they have a partnership with the county, they will also provide funding to the county for management and trees and seeding and controlled burns to get rid of invasives. They will help with all those things. So it's a great partnership. And a lot of the conserved lands we work on with other conservancies partner with the Game Commission to do just that.
Yeah, I would just add, there's a lot of precedent for having multi-use trails and archery hunting happening at the same time. Valley, their North Range is open to mountain bikers, horse, hikers, while hunting is going on.
And the Game Commission's doing fire management to control a grassland habitat. It's actually a really good precedent, a good example of a successful multi-use thing that involves deer population management.
I just wanted to thank you for all the work you've done as well. I'm one of the astronomers in the room. It's just a tremendous amount of great detail. And I see you addressed some of the things we brought up with the Red Trail parking area or Red Trail area where we do a lot of astrophotography and astronomy. I can't quite tell from the photo over there where the new park will be, where the astronomers would hang out. I think the new equestrian trailer area is good because it'll kind of keep us a little bit separated. But we still need a field that is relatively level, and I know it starts to rise up there, and a field that's grass, not weeds and high stuff. It needs to be mowed, and something we can drive on, so we don't have to carry our equipment really far. So. Is there a spot like that?
We think there is between the parking areas. We're in the center there. So if we go over later and look at it.
Okay.
We'll show you what we think will work. Also, thanks for mentioning that, because a lot of the ideas here, and I hope some of you saw your ideas here in the plans, came from members of the public, members of the committee, people from the county who gave us those ideas. So, the first meeting, I mean, Beth Pilling, who's with the park board at the back of the room, talked about identity and a visitor center possibility and things like that. So, this is an evolution of our thinking based on good recommendations like that to get to this point. And certainly through the draft plan, I'm sure you're going to have comments to hopefully further refine those ideas.
Hi, this is my first time to one of these meetings. I want to thank you for a good conversation with people keeping calm. We all come from different mentalities and have different needs, and thank you again for following a plan that is important. I've seen other situations where people tend to let their emotions get the better of them. We all have these difficulties, but thank you for keeping level heads. Thank you for being available to help dealing, especially as you speak about the invasive species. I think of people who have young children who do not necessarily want to use a neat type of a spray on their little ones. And to cull the deer, it's excellent. Yes, they've done it at the Norristown Farm Park for quite a while now. And as much as people may see Bambi, if they would see how very difficult Bambi had, what a difficult time Bambi has once the ticks have become an infestation on them, this is not untenable, nor is it a kind situation for that deer. I know there are many layers to this, but I thank you very much for the opportunity for us to be able to go out to a relative dark sky site to look up and realize, yes, there are stars up there, not street lights, not other things. It's wonderful to have that option. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the comments, and really, I hope those of you at the county are hearing those comments, because this is really the county giving us an opportunity to work with you. And everybody we've been involved with in this process could not have been nicer. Everybody's been really helpful.
Hi, thanks for the presentation tonight. I wanted to just share something I read today related to your comment about conservation easements with park neighbors. It's not related to that. I saw that I think it's in Chester County, they're using state grant money to encourage the conservation area's neighbors to turn their lawns into meadows.
Yes.
And that is so cool. And
I'm actually very familiar with that. I'm on the board of trustees at Willistown Conservation Trust, and they're one of many nonprofit recipients of that exact grant. And so I think we got, the first round was only $50,000, but like, that's $50,000 to go into lawn to meadow conversion on conservation easements, and even beyond conservation easements. And that program is robust and well-funded and will be moving forward. So that's a wonderful idea. It's a great way to help further incentivize folks to, you still own your land. You can, and there's ways to even make some money or have tax breaks, but then also to beautify that landscape, right? Get funds and technical assistance to convert from lawn space into functional meadows. So thank you for bringing that up. It's a great program.
Okay, I guess I have two questions maybe. One area that I feel you haven't really even remotely touched on, and it was huge the first meeting, was environmental education and the volunteer group that's non-existent or very little. What are the plans with that? And then with you talking about, coming in and doing all the non-invasive removal and everything, what group is going to organize that, and what kind of plan do you have to successfully have that get to the game point?
Sure. First question, as I mentioned, we're only covering part of what we're recommending. One of the big recommendations is going to be for the county to either hire through a staff position or through a contractor, a volunteer coordinator. Because at the first meeting, like you mentioned, we had lots of people saying, if we could volunteer, we would be there. And we think there's two purposes there. Joe, with his work, and they have, some of the volunteers go out there now, but the numbers are small because the information is not good. And quite frankly, the staff doesn't have time to do that organization. So, and it could be done for all of Region 2, maybe just Green Lane Park, however the county want to do it. So that's a major recommendation. The other one is environmental education. One of the reasons we have a visitor center, maybe it's really going to be a nature center, is to have a place for that. I mean, this is a major park in the state. This is bigger than a lot of state parks. You can go to smaller state parks and they have visitor centers that are robust. And this is a very modest one we're suggesting here, but it could be a place for education and to supplement what the county environmental education specialist does now, which they're limited on. And I mentioned next week we're having the education forum, which I think we have about 10 or 15 people signed up for at least, which is going to be at Hemlock Point, right? We're at Hemlock Point for that, in Joe's office. So we're expecting, we want to see how do people think they can interact with that. And that has to be managed and run by the county, but we hope that area educators will be open to participating in that, right?
Yeah.
The second part of the question is, how do you do the stewardship? It's a long process. It's an expensive process, but the township can get grants for those types of things through the National Fish and Wildlife Federation, through DCNR and other funding groups to leverage county money to basically usually double it or more to do those projects. And we're not suggesting that the county do that work, the staff, because these are big projects where you come in and you might do, a 100-acre area where you have to get rid of invasives, replant, maintain it for a couple of years and make sure it comes back, nurture it along, and after 3, 4, or 5 years, maybe that's when it gets turned back over to county staff to maintain. So it's a process, and we'll make recommendations. Like I think the Perkiomen and Grasslands area is a big one, but it's a very visible one. And even though it's a big area, it's a relatively small lift. The amount of area it's going to improve, right? And it's also going to improve and attract more birds for habitat, and also a very important user group, bird enthusiasts, right? Birds, so that will probably be very high on the list. So it's a process, and it's gonna take time. I mean, 20 years has gone by since the last master plan, and that's probably, you know, if you wanna say what didn't get done in the last master plan, the stewardship didn't get done, because it was recommended. It was recommended, but it just sort of fell off the table, let's say. So what we're trying to do is reemphasize that part of this, because like in our view, if you did none of the other improvements, if you improve the environment, enhance the ecology of the park, that's the best thing you could do right away. And maybe for the next 10 years, we'll see, you know, how the money flows and what the priorities are.
Do you mind if I add just a little bit? I'll try to be brief. Great comments. One thing I'll just reiterate that Peter already said, there's so much more behind the scenes and within the document where all of these user groups are taken into consideration. I remember thoughtful comments about education and volunteerism. They were not lost at all. And you'll see within the recommendations matrix, one of the, you know, there's only so many columns we can add. One of them is this something suitable for a volunteer or an educational program, right? Because as mentioned, you know, to convert a couple hundred acres into grassland, that's not really a volunteer effort. You're gonna have to hire contractors or work with the game commission. Also, you know, if there's felling larger trees, that's not really a volunteer activity. But there's tons of great programs, there's tons of great activities within that space that could be volunteer programs. And we're talking with nonprofits and, you know, I hate to say trust me, right? But, you know, your comments are well received, and, you know, even though it wasn't heavy in the presentation, trust me that education is never lost. Education, I mean, we're hoping to build a visitor center and really have a foundation.
That's 20 years from now.
Right, but I mean, and also, I mean, here's the other thing. We're going to set the framework. We're going to create these ideas. It's up to volunteers to volunteer, right? It's up to people to want to do these things. So I think I think this will most certainly help facilitate those ideas and interests.
The other thing is, you know, we're giving you a guidebook, right, a roadmap. It's going to be up to all of you to gently push the commissioners in that direction. I heard somebody make a comment, lives around here, said, well, the county never spends any money up here because there aren't enough people. Well, that may be true. I don't know. Okay, that's a political statement. But you're the folks who are going to convince this board of commissioners and the next board of commissioners and the next board of commissioners that this should be an important priority for the county. And I mean, it's a fact that this park is unique in the state. I mean, it's a huge county park. It's got great resources. It's better than a lot of state parks. So, you know, we all take the things we have for granted sometimes, right? And maybe your job is to ask the commissioners, let's not take it for granted. Let's encourage Aqua to be a more engaged partner. Okay, that's another hurdle, and that has to come, you know, from commissioner level to CEO of Aqua level, right? Nobody's going to listen to us. That has to be that's who carries that message and makes that deal. So there are a lot of opportunities here to move it forward more quickly than slowly.
You know, some of the things, we have that feedback form. It is open now. If anybody wants to start to give that type of feedback that says how valuable this is, it is a resource we need to invest in moving forward and start to, because those types of comments are the ones that are needed, as well as making sure we got the plan right? We want to hear both sides of that feedback, so.
Anything else, any other comments, suggestions? Great, well, thank you for your time. Thanks for your applause, Bob. And everybody have a great holiday. March 20, put that in your book. We'll try to get that word out. That's going to be at Red Hill Borough.